So it's the next day today. Vegetable pie. Leftovers from yesterday. So it was last night's supper, lunch today, supper tonight. It'll be lunch tomorrow, supper tomorrow night, and probably one or both meals the next day. A good experiment. Yeah, so I put together my third tier tonight. I re-examined my first tier, um, and I tried making it square like this one, but as it turns out, that doesn't work. It's just an anomaly that this square shape happens to fit. The ratios line up, and it may still not really even fit like exactly or perfectly because none of this is exact. It's all practical up to a very low threshold of precision or accuracy. It's not a rational object, it's a practical object. And I'm still torn, especially after making this third piece and just realizing how difficult these shapes are. And I'm very curious about the structural support of this. If it's all columns, it's going to be a lot more solid. If it were this thing as a more rational proportions built correctly, that's another story. But this ain't. So anything I can do. But like, also I'm wondering, because it seems as though like the air is gonna push, when the air pushes up on my other version where it's just slanted in one column, it's gonna give lift, it's gonna give spin. This, where it's also tilting like sideways, which is in on the surface of a sphere, it's going to catch more of the directly upward movement. But then that's going to create more spin, not necessarily more lift. If this is being influenced by the straight up more than the other one, it's going to spin more. But it's also going to have more air resistance. So then the question becomes, what's the ratio between like the lift, the spin, and the wind and the air resistance? I do not have what it takes to figure that out. If that were my goal, to figure that out, and I put everything into it, it would probably take me like 6 months to get the most rudimentary grasp on it. And that is not an appropriate amount of time for me to spend on this object. And this seems to be working okay, and I think it would be a little better and easier if I did just make them straight, and because I can't answer the question, but I'm still going to build my fourth tier, and I may just do this anyway because it's harder, but sometimes the easier thing's the right thing. I'm being very stubborn. What's good about that is that even if I don't choose to do it this way, because I decided to try, there are questions now just flooding my mind. They will never ever go away. Those questions might not even have come up had I not attempted this. Now those are like railroad spikes in my mind, just waiting for the rail. And when that right rail when that right size rail comes, boom, it's going to click. Might not ever happen, but 5 years from now, if I get 3 little math problems that just add up, and all of a sudden I'm like, ping, because this has been discouraging enough that I won't forget how bad I am at the math of it, And even all my trying to figure things out 3-dimensionally, I can't figure it out. Yeah. Another interesting side note is that on my second tier, well, it's my third horizontal plane, but my second, on the top of my second rectangular-ish object, I put these paper clips on just to hold the levels together. Hold on. Oh man, I was gonna play more Burglar while I talked. I watched that Whoopi Goldberg Burglar movie yesterday. It was awesome. It makes me feel like I was being generous about the way I felt about Jumpin' Jack Flash. Burglar's hilarious. And Bobcat Goldthwait, he's really funny in that movie. Whoopi Goldberg, Burglar, Goldberg, Goldthwait, Goldberg. Oops. Pushing when I should have been pulling. Alright. So this is supposed to go on like this, fit like a glove. But then I realized I taped this piece backwards with my large end towards the inside and my short end towards the outside, and it's supposed to be the other way around on top. That'll affect my diagonal minusculely. I'll fix it, but I almost fixed it right when I figured it out, and then I was like, if I'm gonna talk, I'm talking about this too. Yeah, this goes back on here. Again, still, I'm just really struggling about how I'm going to make this fin, but I at least have to make my best effort at figuring out how to do it. But I'm still very torn as to what my final thing will be. I'm starting to lean toward the straight up column approach. Ooh, I don't know if this is going to work. Well, I have to do it the old-fashioned way. Interesting as an object. That's it for today, I think. I never know. Time to eat my supper. I know this is a... I guess at worst it's harmless silliness. Well, maybe not at worst, but pretty close. I hope you're having a good day.
This means that even the Supremes are not trying to spend time in figuring out whose side they're going to be on in the human traumas that are that they've caused on themselves. And even though they don't know that, like that they're doing this to themselves. And so let's explain how this works. When you get into a life, you have all these experiences, okay? But when you come into this life, you come in as this complete being, okay? And this is synonymous with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head as a human body. I'll just take it into flesh. But as you start making agreements, I love your show.
Thank you for sharing.
For sharing too. Yeah, I mean, you're more than welcome. You know, it's interesting that was brought up because I was talking to a hypnotherapist, and they were talking about how there's this certain point.
I think so. Still having trouble with them deep ones, but so far as my old tone goes, it's kind of ringing kind of nice today. I wanted to dress this up. It's New Year's Eve. I wanted to find the symbolic importance of the day. I'm not saying it's not there, but I am saying I found none. For me, today is just today, special as it is. And looking for its superficial specialness, I lost a bit of its real specialness. Even that seems an attempt to dress this up. I worked on my 4th tier tonight. I'll be collaging this with yesterday's video and a couple from this morning. This has just been such an awful, horrible experiment. And when I look at this, just this object, it almost looks like a mathematical object, but it's not. But it still is like a proxy. I remember, and I don't know if this is true or not, I've seen some glorious Roman statues, but there's this commentary between the ratios between the Greeks and the Romans, and I don't know, I've heard it referred to the statues and the measurements of the proportions of statues. I don't know if that's true, and I certainly don't know if it's true of all of them. I think probably the creme de la creme of both are it, and the others are otherwise, right? But I do think at least there's an established story between what the Greeks and Romans saw, and there's all different kinds of Greeks, and not by happenstance or circumstance, but by zeroing in or zoroing in the Turkey Persian coastline of Greece seems to be where a node or a crux of the situation condenses. But there does seem to be this narrative of what the Greeks sought versus, as far as knowledge, and I mean the whole comedic drama thing, with the masks and philosophy and so on, and the credit we give to the Greeks. Probably a little too much so to Plato and Aristotle, and certainly to Plato's Republic. Misinterpreted, misconstrued. As it is, much like Nietzsche with the whole death of God thing, or if anything, he's just like the great propagandist of like the only hope. He's like the last hope, of that era or whatever. But yeah, like I know, like I don't. But how like the Romans translated things and were good at studying or copying things, but that their main goal was war. I mean, what can you say about Romans or Americans, right? Could a historian 2, 3, 4,000 years from now, 2,500 years from now, adequately say like what the in a sentence what the Americans were about today, never mind over the last couple 100 years. It's ridiculous. I'm not even the same as my neighbor, any of them. Yet we have this commonality, so. But anyway, I finished this fourth tier. It's just such a torturous process and project. Though I will say you can't make this stuff up. I've been torturing myself if I'm to continue with this project, whether I'm going to go with these what I consider double slanted because they're tilted and tilted. They're automatically tilted in because it's a sphere. They're like this, but then they're also like this. Versus my other ones, because this is 2 petitions. I have my circle separated into 60, and this is 2/60ths or 1/30th is this width. This is a 30th, a 30th, a 30th, a 30th of the concentric circles that make up the collapsed cross section of my hemisphere. In the 1/60th version, it would be half this width and just flippers turned like this versus like this and like this. So you get that double inwardness. Triple if you consider that even the flat non-bent thing is already tipping in, receiving, push. So it's like this double, triple inwardness. And I've been painting over going with what I think would be easier of just this, though it would still involve some math that I'm uncomfortable with. Practical, not even applied, practical. Practical manual. But then today, I started this whole, well, I won't start it, but toward the beginning, Christmas, when I was starting with this trying to levitate an object above first a fan and then the outside of a vacuum with Zorro, which I associate with Zoroaster. I mean, it's not just that I associate it, it's associated. Zarathustra, Zoroaster, this huge story that stretches through time. Dread Pirate Roberts and Aesop. It didn't occur to me yesterday when I was at this job, but it did today, like what made me finally make up my mind that I'm gonna do this one. Is that, and I'm pretty secluded of a person, so it doesn't take much to affect me. And I live pretty much in white bread America, not totally, but pretty much. And today these people whose house we're painting, they bought the house a while back. They're moving up from Philadelphia. That I knew yesterday. But anyway, they showed up today because they're moving in this weekend. The floors just got done 3 days ago. We were there painting yesterday and today, and just trying to get as much as we could out of the way before they got all their stuff in. And it's a couple who are both doctors from Philadelphia, their daughter, and their nanny. Well, their nanny, the nanny and the daughter, who's just a little girl, I mean, I don't know. She can't be much more than 3. If she's 4, she's a very short 4. Speaking fluent Spanish, you know, and, you know, her parents are both white, she's white, you know, but the nannies speak Spanish, and it might not even be Spanish. It might be Portuguese, it might be some other dialect, but to me it sounds like Latin, Spanish, and I'm sorry for being ignorant of that. Please forgive me. I can't tell you how bad I felt being so stupid in their midst. When this kid was talking, like she was pointing at me and saying stuff in Spanish, and I was just like, I don't know anything. I am so stupid. You know, it made me feel really bad about myself, which maybe I should. But anyway, it struck me, Spanish, you know, and then I got to thinking, like, I don't know, it's one of those synchronicities, and often too, I place so much on like the prophets and their trim tabbing, which I was going to say the other day about like the Japanese flag, how you'll have to reference my other thing. I don't want to get into it, but like the Japanese flag, how it's not necessarily one of them who picked it, but whoever that person was who first made that red dot on a white background, the most brilliant simple symbol representing the wild carrot, second year flower, Queen Anne's lace, bird's nest. Whoever first did that, it could have been completely syncretist, or it also could have been the effect of a prophet, clairvoyant, time peering, time traveling, sorcerer, magician, mathematical peer through the veil, through the fields. Could have been all of those types of things of a person interfering in such a way where they weren't the one actually making the mark, making the stamp. But because they can peer through time, there was a person who made that first red dot on a white background and said, "This is us." If there was intervention on that higher level, it could have come by speaking with that person's brother 2 weeks before, by one who could peer through time. One who could peer through time knowing that you're going to speak with that person and say such and such a thing. But they wouldn't have to know that if they could peer through time. They wouldn't have to do the calculations and the algorithms and not even the quantum this or that. They just have to look through that potentiality cloud of time and see when it condenses. They can just talk to you until they see it condense. They don't even have to know what they're doing. If they know what they're doing, it works even better. One can imagine. But by just peering through time, seeing that cloud, and watching it condense. And as soon as you see that condensation of time, while peering through it, you know you got it locked in. It seems as though at the very least that's a pretty darn good analogy. And like I said, it could be several times removed, but if that bond is strong enough, if that vision is strong enough, you know, I've made brief forays in peering through time, which sounds like a major claim, but I don't do it the way they do. I've made a reference before, like, or I've at least implied that I'm a caboose on this train. I'm not. I'm a rusty, broken lantern that a stowaway hobo on the caboose of the train picked up at an impromptu emergency stop. There I was. He picked me up. I didn't work. By scavenging the lanterns that do work, he got a bit of old filament, siphoned off a little bit of kerosene whale oil, put it in my tank, and I lit. I'm old enough and I'm rusty enough that I'm a decrepit, ill-working, ill-suited, broken down old lamp, with no volition of my own. But this stowaway hobo on the caboose of the train picked me up. Now I've become an oddity. And beneath all that rust, beneath all that tarnish, I've still been able to spark a little flame. And there's a little bit of interesting embroidery that even an untrained eye can see and be interested in. So I'll become an interesting oddity on the caboose of the train, and as the hobo hides, I'm a very small wonder. Very, very small. If the hobo has a chance, he'll clean me up a bit. And so on. And so on. And this stowaway hobo may reveal to me and others the detail of my embroidery. Scuff away the detriment. Find or refine or refined the delicacy of my structure, the hand taste of my, I don't want to say luminal body, my brilliance. I guess luminal might at least refer to a reflection. But at some point, we do have to not wish to be merely a reflection, but learn how to kindle that inner light. I'm trying to remind myself because I'm a failure, you know. But I can't imagine. I only have at this point one dream of what, well, it's a double entwined dream, but it's not a double. It's a doubleness of two things that point at one thing. It's not a division or, in this sense, a yin-yang split thing. Good and evil are too often set as opposites, and they're not. They're not. God's good dream and God's bad dream are not opposites. They're not. One is the emptiness where the answer to the question fails, where it's not found. The other is where the answer is found. There's a question and there's an answer. Evil does not answer the question. Good does. That's a huge difference. That's not like, it's not even a duality. It's not incommensurate. There's nothing like beautiful about that. So just to kind of round this this little project out. Oh yeah, what I was going to say was when I heard the Spanish, it was like Zorro. And these guys were from Philadelphia. And when I started a lot of this off on Christmas, I was playing Zorro, and I had my little shape up here, and I was ringing it like a bell, and I called the video Guston's Liberty after, I think it's Philip Guston. I think he's out of Pennsylvania. He's either out of Pittsburgh or Philly, I think. Maybe not, but anyway. Between Zorro and the bell, these doctors were from Philadelphia. I heard Spanish and it was like, that's it. because that reminds me of Zorro, because I was watching Zorro, and this is the Z. It zigzags. The other doesn't. It's a column. It's a C. This is a Z. In this case, it looks like a Z in brackets or a Z in parentheses, but boink, 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 boink. So that's it. Whoops. So obviously there's a lot of lean to it here. Let's see if I can get it up, as they say. So if I build it, this would be, what, one, essentially this 60 times, kind of, sort of, without these. Just these reaching between these. We'll see. There's another project I want to do, though, before I carry on with that. Another little more artistic of a thing. I did want to talk about asceticism a little bit, but maybe I'll save that for another time and just say that I don't know much about Foucault, but I know that he said that homosexuality was like a technology of love, which makes a lot of sense. And I've thought a lot about asceticism because I'm so not ascetic. I love consumption of every kind. But I also notice its detrimental effects on me specifically, especially because of my voraciousness. But anyway, I've come to the conclusion that asceticism it's unnatural, but it's a technology of will, and it's a technology of God's good dream, and it's a technology of when done right, which probably it almost never is. Certainly not by me, but it does seem like a worthy focal point to aspire to, given that God's bad dream, what we might refer to as the devil, is this agglomeration of a hemorrhaging of free will. It's like what we call the circle of life is wrong. What we call good and evil and balance is wrong because it's been going on for so long, maybe forever, that we mistake the way things have been and the way things are for the way that things should be. And we don't understand that the emergency plan has been deployed, and we're describing the emergency plan as if it were the natural state of things, and it's not. What we call the circle of life, what we call all these things, is the natural state of the emergency plan, which is meant to go back into the potentiality. Something went wrong. The emergency plan was deployed. The emergency plan is meant to be put back into plan mode, not active mode, which is the violence in the world and the violence in the animal kingdom, reaching all the way into our guts, are the consequences. The most simple way you could think about it would be kind of like how, Dr. Sebi, for instance, describes cancer not as like a mutation, but as the last defense of the body sucking. That all disease is caused by mucus and the breakdown of the mucous membrane. And if you have excess mucus in different places, that's what causes the different diseases. And how cancer is the body's last resort for, it's like the last defense of the body to centralize acidity into one place so that it can be processed later when the body's more alkaline and capable of doing so. So we can think a lot, to my mind, and I have some of the images that support this that are at least as rational as much of the math and science that's out there, in a different way, but it all builds up and it coalesces and all these things, and all of a sudden you have animals and faces and temperaments. And I'm going to try to get to more of that. But like, one could think of sharks. I pick on sharks. The future shouldn't have sharks. I'll just go ahead and say it. The ocean is a horrible place. A horrible place. A horrible, 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 horrible place. Fuck all that shit about the beauty of this, that, whatever. The ocean's a horrible place where meat eats meat in every fucking way imaginable. The technology of the world is completely usurped by the ferocity of the mouths of the ocean. It's not just horrible for humans. It's a horrible place. And one must wonder how horrible the land must have been that mammals decided to go back there when they did. Speaking of which, Hieronymus Bosch and his earthly delights in the Garden of Eden. And this is, supposedly late 1400s, early 1500s, though I had seen a reference that put its end date at the same year that Raphael finished his first papal apartment painting. Just saying. But this figure, and if you look at it online, if you can find this figure online, I say he, but this figure has this little gleam in its eye. It's almost like a seal, but it's not a seal. It's got almost a human face. Tail, kinda, with arms, crawling out of the sea. Crawling out of the water. Evolution. So I'm saying this is a symbolic prophecy of evolution. It's right there in the Garden of Eden. In the abyss that even precedes Adam and Eve. It's not like I'm making it up. I mean, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. And also the fact that that animal's looking directly at us. with a gleam in its eye. Not unimportant. But yeah, asceticism is a technology of will. So I guess what I'm saying is, the whole as within, so without type deal. And again, I feel as though, especially like a lot of projective geometry and universal hyperbolic geometry, speaks to that inwardness and outwardness and like polarity. Polarity in the universal hyperbolic geometry sense, which is different than the way we normally think of polarity. Though there's, correlation and all that. But the way that everything pierces through us, right? Like tachyons or neutrinos or dark matter and dark energy is just piercing through us like we're suspended, like we're these puppets on all these strings, all these mycelial networks of energies, never mind all the waves and all the vibrations and all that going through everything. There's a lot there, and there's a lot of ways that things are affected. And I guess what I'm saying is that, like, when we stop killing each other, yes, but we have to stop eating meat. We have to stop eating animals because they're so high up. They're so, deer and cows and even chickens. I mean, they're just so high up. They're too much like us. We can't do that. It infects everything because they're beaming, and their fear, their nightmare, their horror, their disappointment, their terror, their horror is cast into the world as forms. There are more forms that exist eternally than can ever be represented temporally. But time need not unfold exactly the way that it does. And the hemorrhage of forms like sharks, like polar bears, shouldn't exist. It's a miserable existence. It's terrible. How bad must have the warm climates been, right? How bad must a more livable place have been for a polar bear to have to be? Say, oh, well, you don't know. That's your opinion. But no, I mean, think about it. It's a miserable fucking existence. A polar bear lives a miserable existence. Even the healthy ones, not just the ones at the Brooklyn Zoo I saw when I was a kid, who I felt really fucking bad for, I'm not saying, I have a vendetta against them or I want to kill them. Poor dudes, man. It's awful, But in some extent, they are not God's bad dream, but they're the response that the form of the empowered bad dream enables in order to create the balance that our poor decisions engender. When we make better decisions, it's not just trickle down, right? But in a sense, in the same way, people say, oh, it's not trickle down, it's trickle up. Oh, it's not trickle up, it's trickle down. It's both. It goes every which way. Water goes up, water goes down, water goes sideways. It evaporates, it rains. It evaporates, it snows. Pressure forces water up, gravity pulls it down, etc. Negative pressures pull it up, etc. Warm fronts, cold fronts, all that. Water moves every which way. But the whole thing with not even necessarily abstinence or celibacy, but that too. But just the idea of asceticism, that it's unnatural, that in an arena where that hemorrhaging of free will were stuffed back into pure potentiality, those types of actions would no longer be required. I mean, they wouldn't even be considered. But in this arena, where power is gained, real power is gained within the hemorrhage, and where the hemorrhage meets the body proper, asceticism exerts itself against that. When it works the right way. When it works the wrong way, it actually works for that hemorrhage, which is probably mostly what we see. But in its purest form, the idea of achieving true inner and inner and intra intimacy with oneself, with others, with what people normally call the divine. But I don't like that word, really. Without touch, but touching with something else. To actually be able to achieve that seems like one of the absolute pinnacles of human achievement. Really, not just to feel like it could be done, but to do it, and to do it with everyone. And that's hard. That is a hard problem. And worthy of everyone's attention, and certainly mine. And it's worth noting on my part that thinking about it every single day doesn't seem to help. I'm not there yet. But that's what I'm looking for. Among other things, but I'm certainly looking for that.